Hi, you're back with Dr. Kelly, and we're talking about dairy, and we're on part three. Just got finished discussing BCM7 and wondering why it's such a big deal. Well, here's one of the reasons. BCM7 is a protein. As you recall, it's a chain of amino acids, and this particular protein has the capacity to pass through the blood-brain barrier, which is a very important shield to the brain to reduce the toxins that can influence our brain or our central nervous system. And because of it is a respiratory suppressor, there is a small body of research that is connecting SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, with the intake of cow's milk as a baby goes to bed with a bottle of cow's milk. Now, certainly we know that breastfed babies have a far lesser incidence of SIDS than others, and this condition is extremely complicated, no doubt, and it would be wrong to say there's a direct connection. I would also be wrong to say that there may not be a direct connection, and more research needs to be done, but nonetheless it is a respiratory suppressor. While that's in the background, the truth, my biggest concern about dairy and what the research has to say is that this BCM7 causes the body to have an inflammatory reaction, and it causes lots of irritable bowel disease. Now, there's a spectrum of irritable bowel disease, from Crohn's to colitis to diverticulitis to diverticulosis. But the point is, it all challenges absorption. We'll get to that in a moment. The other big news is that BCM7 in some research has been associated with type 1 diabetes. That's the diabetes that you develop as a child, and it really turns out to be an autoimmune disease where the pancreas is being destroyed. And in large part, there is some influence to suggest that cow's milk, when ingested regularly with children, that they end up having a greater predilection for type 1 diabetes than those children not exposed to cow's milk. And again, it would be wrong to say there's a direct connection because this is a very complicated conversation, but I think it's important that we bring these things up. So colon disease, it really is a problem, not just because your belly hurts, but because it ultimately leads to absorption challenges. Really, the only reason you have a gut is so that what goes in your mouth, which hopefully is nutritional, can get absorbed from your gut into your cells, so you can feed your cells, you can nourish your cells, you can heal your cells. And if in fact you have poor absorption, the digestive issues will cause malnutrition, which will cause a slowness in healing or lack of ability to heal. And what happens so often is the body gets stuck at a stuck point where you can't lose weight. You're just stuck at that certain weight even though you may try. The body is in a very stressful state because of this background inflammation that's occurring from the exposure to the BCM7. Well, while I have been a little bit bleak, let me just say that there's another way to approach this whole piece around dairy, and we'll get to that in the next section. But the first step of the two steps would be this: just for a moment realize you have the ability to simply for 30 days change your diet and get rid of dairy, and then at the day 31 you can bring it back in and see how you do. Really what you have to lose is 30 days of ice cream or 30 days of yogurt, whatever you love. But if it were to help you and really change your health, at the end of that 30 days, you would know. So in that process, if you wanted to play that game, here are the substitutes. Instead of milk, you could use nut milks like almond milk and rice milk. I don't put soy milk on here, sadly, because of the genetic modification with soybeans. If you want to do cheese, it gets a little bit sticky here, although goat cheese has less casein. Generally, commercial pasteurized cheese, it's really hard to find anything that tastes like it that is not coming from goat's milk, so the substitution is challenging. Ice cream, the good news is you can make this fantastic ice cream out of coconut milk, and in the market it's referred to as coconut bliss, and I think you would enjoy that. While butter really does come from dairy, in essence it's truly the fat in the cow, and when you eat the meat of a cow you can see the fat in that meat. Well, that fat gets into the butter, but it also gets convoluted with some of the dairy solids. If you take the dairy solids out of butter, what's left is something called ghee, and that's called clarified butter. So you can have ghee as clarified butter even while you're on a dairy-free diet. And with regard to yogurt, really the only good option from my perspective is coconut milk yogurt. You can still get the acidophilus from that. I have found other yogurts are just not quite as tasty. So in actual fact, these would be some of the things you would substitute on your list for those 30 days. But as I mentioned earlier, there's part 2. There's another way to go about this, and the next part will speak to that specifically. So we'll look forward to speaking to you in a few minutes.